The words hit Simone like a physical blow, each syllable cutting deeper than the last. My mother thinks it would be better if you didn't come to Robert's wedding. David wouldn't even look at her as he delivered the crushing news. He stood in their kitchen, still in his work clothes, fidgeting with his phone while Simone sat frozen at the breakfast bar where she'd been planning her outfit for the ceremony just moments before. What do you mean better? Her voice came out smaller than she intended. 8 years of marriage, and this was how his family really felt about her. It's complicated, Simone. You know how traditional my mother is. She thinks you're too different from our family. The unspoken words hung heavy in the air. Too black. Too outspoken. Too successful in ways they couldn't understand or control. Simone's hands trembled as she set down her coffee mug. And what did you tell her? For the first time that evening, David met her eyes. The guilt there told her everything she needed to know before he even spoke. I told her I understood. The sound that escaped Simone's throat was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. She'd spent years trying to fit into David's world, biting her tongue at family dinners when his relatives made their little comments about her urban background, her exotic hair, her aggressive business ideas. She'd smiled through it all, believing that love would eventually win them over. She'd been so naive. 8 years, David. 8 years I've been your wife, and you're going to let them erase me from your brother's wedding like I don't exist. It's just one day, Simone. Robert's Day. We can't make this about us. Make this about us? Simone stood up so quickly her chair scraped against the hardwood floor. David, they're making this about race. They're making this about the fact that your wife doesn't look like the perfect little suburban princess they had picked out for you in their heads. David's jaw tightened. That's not fair. My family isn't racist. No? Then why am I the only family member being asked to stay home? Why is it that every time we're at family gatherings I feel like I'm on trial? Why does your mother introduce me to her friends as David's wife, instead of by my name? The questions poured out of her, years of suppressed hurt and frustration finally finding their voice. David looked away again, unable to answer because they both knew the truth. Where's the wedding being held again? Simone asked quietly. Harper Grand Resort. It's some fancy place up in the mountains. Robert's fiancée insisted on it. Cost them a fortune, but they wanted somewhere exclusive. David's voice carried a note of resentment, as if spending money on a wedding was somehow vulgar. Simone almost laughed at the irony, but the pain was too fresh, too raw. Harper Grand Resort. Her flagship property. The crown jewel of the luxury resort empire she'd built from nothing, using her grandmother's maiden name to keep her business separate from her personal life. David had no idea that his wife owned the very place where his family was planning to celebrate without her. I need some air, she whispered, grabbing her keys from the counter. Simone, where are you going? Can't we just talk about this? She paused at the door, looking back at the man she'd loved for 10 years, married for 8. Right now he looked like a stranger. Talk about what, David? Talk about how your family has never accepted me? Talk about how you just threw away 8 years of marriage to keep mommy happy? Talk about how you're perfectly fine with your wife being treated like she's not good enough to breathe the same air as your precious family. You're being dramatic? No. Her voice was steel now, the hurt crystallizing into something harder. I'm being real. Maybe for the first time in this marriage. She walked out, leaving David standing in their kitchen, and for the first time in 8 years, Simone Harper didn't look back. The October air was crisp against her face as she sat in her car in the driveway, hands gripping the steering wheel. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Melanie. How's the wedding planning going? Need help with your outfit. Simone stared at the message, then typed back, change of plans. I'm not invited anymore. Her phone rang immediately. What do you mean you're not invited? It's your brother-in-law's wedding. David's family decided I'm not suitable for the occasion. The silence on the other end spoke volumes. Melanie had met David's family. She knew. Where's the wedding? Harper Grand Resort. Another pause. Then Melanie's voice, careful and controlled. Simone. Harper Grand Resort. Yes. Your Harper Grand Resort? Mine. A slow smile spread across Simone's face for the first time that evening. Mel, I think it's time David's family learned exactly who they're dealing with. Grace Harper had raised her daughter to be strong, but she'd also taught her to be smart. As Simone sat in her childhood bedroom the next morning, surrounded by business magazines and financial reports, she could almost hear her mother's voice. Baby, sometimes the best weapon is the one they never see coming. Simone had left David sleeping that morning and driven straight to her mother's house in Decatur. Grace took one look at her daughter's face and put the kettle on for tea without asking questions. That was the thing about mothers, they always knew. Tell me, Grace said simply, settling into the chair across from Simone at the kitchen table that had witnessed countless homework sessions, heartbreaks, and victories. Simone laid it all out: the disinvitation, David's betrayal, the years of microaggressions and barely concealed racism from his family. Grace listened without interruption, her dark eyes growing harder with each detail. And David just went along with it? Grace's voice was deadly quiet. He said he understood their position. Grace's teacup rattled against the saucer as she set it down. That boy never deserved you. Mama? No, baby. I held my tongue for 8 years because you loved him, but I've watched that family treat you like you were some kind of charity case. Like you weren't good enough to clean their shoes. Grace leaned forward. Do they have any idea what you've built? Simone shook her head. She'd kept her business empire completely separate from her marriage, operating under her grandmother's maiden name. Harper Luxury Resorts was a multi-million-dollar operation with properties across the Southeast. But to David's family, she was just a consultant who worked from home. The irony wasn't lost on her that she'd taken her husband's last name in marriage, only to use it to build an empire he knew nothing about. 23 properties, Mama. From South Carolina to Texas. And they want to have their perfect little wedding at my flagship resort while making sure I'm not there to taint their precious day. Grace's smile was sharp as a blade. Baby, I think it's time for some truth-telling. Simone's phone buzzed with a text from David. Called in sick today. Can we please talk about this? She showed the message to her mother, who snorted. Now he wants to talk. Where was all this concern last night when he was throwing you under the bus? I should probably go home. Face this head on. You should. But first, call that resort of yours. I think there might be some details about the wedding that need your personal attention. Simone dialed the direct line to James Crawford, the manager of Harper Grand Resort. James had been with her since the beginning, a Howard University hospitality management graduate who understood both excellence and discretion. James, it's Simone. I need you to pull up the Harper Stevens wedding booking for October 20th. Of course, ma'am. Beautiful ceremony planned for the grand ballroom and gardens. The bride has been quite particular about the arrangements. I'm sure she has. James, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to keep it between us for now. Anything, Miss Harper. I'm going to be attending that wedding after all. As an owner, not as a guest. Make sure my private suite is ready, and I want a full report on every detail of their booking. Everything. Ma'am, is everything all right? Simone looked at her mother, who was grinning like she was watching her favorite movie. Everything's about to be perfect, James. For the first time in a long time. When Simone got home, David was pacing the living room like a caged animal. He looked like he hadn't slept, his usually perfect hair disheveled, his face drawn with worry. Thank God you're back. I was worried you might have. He stopped, taking in her calm expression, the subtle smile playing at the corners of her mouth. You seem different. Do I? Simone settled onto the couch, crossing her legs elegantly. How so? Less upset. About yesterday. Oh, I'm not less upset, David. I'm just clearer about what I'm dealing with. David sat down across from her, his hands clasped tightly. Look, I know yesterday didn't go well. Maybe I could talk to my mother again, see if... No. The simple word stopped him cold. No. I don't want you to talk to your mother. I don't want you to negotiate for my basic human dignity. I don't want to be the wife who has to beg her husband's family to treat her with respect. David's face flushed. It's not begging, Simone. It's compromise. It's family. Whose family, David? Because I'm your wife, which makes me your family. But apparently that doesn't count for much when push comes to shove. That's not fair. You know I love you. Simone studied her husband's face, looking for the man she'd fallen in love with a decade ago. He was still handsome, still carried himself with the confidence that had first attracted her. But somewhere along the way, that confidence had become weakness when it came to standing up for what was right. Do you know what I do for work, David? The question seemed to catch him off guard. You're a business consultant. You work from home, help companies with strategy stuff. Strategy stuff. Simone repeated the words slowly. In 8 years of marriage, you've never asked me specifics about my work. Never wondered why I travel so much, never questioned how I can afford to contribute equally to our mortgage, our vacations, our life. I trust you. I figured if you wanted to share details, you would. Or maybe you just didn't think it was important. Maybe you liked having a wife whose work you could dismiss as strategy stuff, because it made you feel more successful, more important. David's mouth opened and closed like a fish. That's not. I never thought. No, you didn't think. You didn't think about how it felt to be introduced to your colleagues as just a consultant. You didn't think about how it felt to have your mother constantly ask when I was going to get a real job. You didn't think about how it felt to watch you nod along when she did it. Simone stood up, smoothing down her dress. She felt lighter somehow, like she'd been carrying a weight she hadn't realized was there. I'm going to the office for a few hours. I have some business to attend to regarding October 20th. October 20th? But that's Robert's wedding day. Yes, I know. She picked up her purse, checking to make sure she had the keys to her Mercedes. Don't wait up. I have a feeling this is going to take a while. Harper Grand Resort was everything Simone had dreamed it would be when she'd first sketched the plans 5 years ago. Nestled in the North Georgia mountains, the property sprawled across 200 acres of pristine wilderness, with a main lodge built from local stone and timber that seemed to grow out of the mountainside itself. As her Mercedes wound up the private drive, Simone felt the familiar surge of pride that came with seeing her vision made real. The resort had been featured in Architectural Digest, Condé Nast Traveler, and Southern Living. It hosted Fortune 500 corporate retreats, celebrity weddings, and high-profile political events. It was, by any measure, a crown jewel of Southern hospitality and luxury. And in 6 days, David's family would be here, celebrating without her, completely unaware that every dollar they'd spent was going into her pocket. James Crawford was waiting for her in the marble-appointed lobby, his usual professional smile warm with genuine affection. At 45, James had the kind of distinguished presence that made guests immediately trust him with their most important events. He also had an MBA from Howard and a wicked sense of humor that Simone appreciated. Miss Harper, welcome home. Thank you, James. Walk with me. They moved through the resort's public spaces, past the soaring windows that offered breathtaking views of the Blue Ridge Mountains, past the infinity pool that seemed to spill directly into the valley below, past the spa where the sound of water features created an atmosphere of zen-like calm. Tell me about our bride and groom, Simone said as they entered her private elevator to the penthouse suite she maintained for her own use. Robert Harper and Jennifer Stevens. Booked the premium wedding package, grand ballroom for 150 guests, cocktail hour in the Mountain View Terrace, dinner reception with full bar service, bridal suite for 2 nights and 6 guest rooms for family. James handed her a thick folder as they entered her suite. The space was decorated in warm earth tones with African art and textiles that reflected her heritage, a stark contrast to the sterile contemporary style of the home she shared with David. The bride has been challenging, James continued diplomatically. She's changed the floral arrangements 3 times, insisted on replacing our award-winning chef's menu with catering from someplace in Buckhead, and demanded we move 3 of our permanent art pieces because they don't match her aesthetic. Simone raised an eyebrow. Our Romari Bearden piece? Among others. Interesting. Simone flipped through the correspondence file. Jennifer's emails grew progressively more demanding and entitled as the wedding date approached. There were complaints about the urban music selection the resort's pianist typically played during cocktail hours, requests to tone down the African-inspired elements in the resort's decor, and a particularly nasty email about wanting to ensure the staff understood their place during the event. The mother of the groom has been equally delightful, James said, his tone carefully neutral. Patricia Harper. She specifically requested that all serving staff for the event be presentable and well-groomed, and asked for assurance that the resort could provide appropriate staff for such a high-class event. Simone's jaw tightened. She'd built Harper Grand Resort with a deliberate focus on employing and promoting people of color in an industry where they were often relegated to invisible positions. Her executive chef was a James Beard Award nominee, her sommelier had trained in France, and her events team had orchestrated weddings for governors and celebrities. But Patricia Harper was concerned about whether they'd be appropriate for her son's wedding. There's more, James said carefully. The bride specifically requested that no ethnic music be played during the ceremony or reception. She's provided a very specific playlist of what she calls classic traditional wedding music. Simone looked at the playlist. It was as white and bland as Wonder Bread. No jazz, no soul, no gospel, no blues, basically no musical genres that black artists had created or significantly influenced. At a resort in Georgia. In 2023. They've essentially tried to whitewash our entire operation for their wedding day, Simone said. That would be an accurate assessment. Simone walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the mountains. Somewhere down there, David was probably still wondering why she'd seemed so calm earlier. He had no idea that his wife wasn't just angry, she was strategizing. James, I want you to set up a meeting with Jennifer and her future mother-in-law. Tell them there are some last-minute details about the wedding that require their attention. Schedule it for Friday, the day before the wedding. What kind of details? Simone smiled and James recognized the expression. He'd seen it before when difficult clients underestimated her, usually right before she reminded them exactly who they were dealing with. The kind that require the owner's personal attention. And the groom's family? Should I mention that you're David's wife? No. Let's let that be a surprise. I have a feeling this conversation is going to be educational for everyone involved. That evening, Simone was in her home office when David knocked on the door. She'd converted the small room into her command center years ago, with multiple monitors, a secure phone line, and enough filing space for the documents related to her business empire. David rarely entered this room. He claimed it made him feel like he was intruding on her hobby. Hey, he said tentatively. I brought you some dinner. Thank you. She accepted the plate without looking away from her computer screen, where she was reviewing the financial projections for her newest property acquisition in Charleston. What are you working on? Business. David hovered in the doorway, clearly wanting to say more but not knowing how to start. Finally, he cleared his throat. I've been thinking about what you said earlier. About my family, about respect. And maybe I could have handled things differently. Simone finally looked at him. Could have. Should have. I should have handled things differently. David sat down in the chair across from her desk. I love you, Simone. I don't want to lose you over this. Over this. Simone repeated. David, this isn't about one wedding. This is about 8 years of watching your family treat me like I'm not good enough, and watching you let them do it. I never let them. You did. Every time you didn't speak up when your mother made her little comments. Every time you laughed along when your father told his jokes about black people. Every time you changed the subject when I tried to talk to you about how they made me feel. David's face crumpled. I didn't know how to handle it. I kept thinking it would get better, that they'd come around if I just gave them time. 8 years, David. How much time do they need? I know I messed up. But this wedding, maybe we can use it as a fresh start. I'll talk to Robert, tell him that either you're invited or I'm not coming either. Simone studied her husband's face. He meant it, she could tell. But it was too little, too late. Don't do that, David. Why not? Because I don't want to be the wife whose husband has to threaten his family to get them to treat her with basic respect. And because... She paused, choosing her words carefully. Because I think this wedding is going to be very revealing for all of us. What do you mean? Simone turned back to her computer screen. You'll see. Friday morning arrived gray and drizzly, the kind of October weather that made the Georgia mountains look mysterious and brooding. Simone stood in her penthouse suite at Harper Grand Resort, watching the wedding preparations unfold in the gardens below through the rain-streaked windows. She'd driven up early that morning, telling David she had client meetings to attend to. It wasn't entirely a lie, she was definitely about to meet with clients. Just not in the way he imagined. At exactly 10 a.m., James knocked on her suite door. They're here, Miss Harper. Jennifer Stevens and Patricia Harper, in the Magnolia conference room. How do they seem? Impatient. Entitled. Miss Stevens has already complained about the coffee temperature and asked if we have any staff who speak proper English to assist with her concerns. Simone smoothed down her burgundy blazer and checked her reflection one final time. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, professional but not overly formal, expensive but not flashy. She wore her grandmother's pearl earrings for strength and her wedding ring out of habit, though she'd been unconsciously twisting it around her finger all morning. Let's go remind them where they are, shall we? The Magnolia conference room was Harper Grand Resort's smaller meeting space, designed for intimate business discussions. Simone had decorated it with warm woods and soft lighting, with original paintings by local African-American artists adorning the walls. It was elegant, welcoming, and distinctly Southern. Jennifer Stevens sat at the head of the polished conference table like she owned the place, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the humidity, her designer dress probably costing more than most people made in a month. She was pretty in the way that came from good genetics and better makeup, with the kind of practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. Patricia Harper sat beside her future daughter-in-law, and the family resemblance to David was unmistakable, The same weak chin, the same pale blue eyes, the same way of holding herself that suggested she'd never been truly challenged in her life. She wore a navy suit that screamed country club respectability and a string of pearls that looked real but not quite expensive enough to be impressive. Both women looked up when Simone entered, their expressions shifting from mild annoyance to poorly concealed surprise. "Good morning, ladies. I'm Simone Harper, the owner of Harper Grand Resort." The silence that followed was deafening. Jennifer recovered first, her smile becoming even more plastic. "Harper? Are you related to David somehow?" "David Harper is my husband." If Simone had thrown a live grenade into the room, the reaction couldn't have been more dramatic. Patricia's face went completely white, then flushed red. Jennifer's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Your husband," Patricia repeated faintly. "Yes. Married 8 years this past June." Simone settled into the chair across from them, perfectly composed. "I understand there have been some concerns about your wedding arrangements that require the owner's personal attention. You own this place?" Jennifer's voice had gone up an octave. "Harper Grand Resort, plus 22 other luxury properties throughout the Southeast. It's a family business." Simone smiled warmly. "My grandmother always taught me the importance of hospitality." Patricia finally found her voice. This is impossible." David never said." "David doesn't know." Simone's smile never wavered. "I've kept my business interests separate from my personal life. I find it helps me maintain perspective on what really matters." She opened the folder James had prepared, pulling out copies of Jennifer's correspondence. "Now, about these concerns you've expressed regarding our staff and facilities." Jennifer's face had gone pale under her foundation. "I think there's been some misunderstanding." "Oh, I don't think so." Simone laid out the emails one by one. "Your concern about our urban music selection. Your request to remove African art from the public spaces. Your insistence that our staff be presentable and well-groomed for your high-class event." She looked up. "I'm curious what you meant by those terms." We just wanted to make sure everything was appropriate," Jennifer stammered. "Appropriate for what, exactly?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Patricia cleared her throat. "This is all very unexpected. But I'm sure we can work through any misunderstandings. David never mentioned that you were in the hospitality business." "Didn't he? How strange. Although I suppose when you think someone's work is just strategy stuff, you don't really pay attention to the details." Patricia's eyes narrowed. She was beginning to recover from the shock, and Simone could see the wheels turning. "Well, regardless of this situation, we've paid for a wedding and we expect to receive the services we contracted for." "Absolutely." Simone leaned forward. "Which brings us to the reason I called this meeting. You see, there's been a significant development regarding your event." "What kind of development?" Jennifer's voice was barely a whisper. "Well, it seems there was an oversight in our booking system. Your wedding is scheduled for tomorrow, October 20th, at 4 p.m. Unfortunately, we've just discovered that the resort is already committed to hosting another event that weekend." "What do you mean?" Patricia's voice was sharp with panic. "We're hosting a reunion for the Spelman College class of 1965. Remarkable women, all of them. Civil rights pioneers, educators, business leaders. They've been planning this reunion for 2 years and we're honored to host them." This was technically true. Simone had indeed agreed to host the reunion about an hour ago, when she called her sorority sister who was organizing the event and offered the resort services pro bono. "That's impossible," Jennifer said desperately. "We booked this date months ago. We have contracts." "Oh, you absolutely do. And we'll honor every detail of your contract." Simone smiled again. "The reunion will be using our secondary facilities. Your wedding will proceed exactly as planned in the grand ballroom and gardens, with full access to all the amenities you've paid for." Both women looked confused. Patricia leaned forward. "Then what's the problem?" "There's no problem at all. I just wanted to make sure you were comfortable with the arrangements, given your previous concerns about the atmosphere of our resort." The realization dawned slowly on both faces. "You mean there will be—" Jennifer couldn't even finish the sentence. "Approximately 200 distinguished African American women celebrating their achievements and sisterhood," Simone said cheerfully. "They'll be here all weekend. The most accomplished group of women you could possibly imagine: doctors, lawyers, professors, entrepreneurs, politicians. Women who integrated schools and broke barriers and built the foundations that allowed women like me to build businesses like this one." Patricia's hands were shaking. This is sabotage. This is business. Simone's voice lost its warmth. And it's also poetic justice. You see, these are exactly the kind of people you've spent years trying to keep away from your family. The kind of people you were so concerned about your children being exposed to. The kind of people you made sure weren't welcome at family gatherings. She stood up, smoothing down her skirt. Your contracts are ironclad, ladies. Your wedding will proceed as scheduled. But so will our reunion. And I have a feeling it's going to be a very educational weekend for everyone involved. You can't do this, Jennifer said, but her voice lacked conviction. I can and I am. But I want you to know that none of this is about revenge. It's about respect. It's about dignity. And it's about consequences. Simone moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, and ladies? I'll be attending the wedding after all. David doesn't know yet. That's going to be my little surprise for him. I hope you don't mind if I bring a guest. My mother is so looking forward to meeting you. She left them sitting in stunned silence, their perfect little world crumbling around them like a house of cards in a hurricane. The drive back to Atlanta gave Simone time to think, but every mile that passed only strengthened her resolve. She'd spent 8 years being the perfect wife, the accommodating daughter-in-law, the woman who swallowed her pride and her power to make other people comfortable. She was done with all of that. David's car was in the driveway when she pulled up, which surprised her. He should have been at work, probably making last-minute arrangements for his brother's wedding weekend. She found him in the living room, pacing again. When he saw her, his face lit up with a mixture of relief and anxiety. Thank God you're back. We need to talk. Do we? Simone set down her purse and studied her husband. He looked terrible, haggard, stressed, like he hadn't slept in days. My mother called me this morning. She said she met with someone from the resort about the wedding arrangements. Someone named Simone Harper. Ah. Simone settled into her favorite chair, the one by the window that caught the afternoon light. How did that conversation go? She was confused. She kept asking if I had a sister I'd never mentioned, or if there was some other Harper family connection she didn't know about. And what did you tell her? David sat down heavily on the couch. I told her the only Harper I knew was my wife. And then she said something that didn't make any sense. Which was? She said that the woman who owns Harper Grand Resort is a black woman named Simone Harper, and that this woman claimed to be married to me. Simone waited, watching her husband's face as the pieces slowly clicked into place. Simone, David said slowly, what do you do for work? I own and operate Harper Luxury Resorts. 23 properties throughout the Southeast, including Harper Grand Resort where your brother is getting married tomorrow. The color drained from David's face. That's impossible. Is it? Why is it impossible, David? Because you're a consultant. You work from home. You do strategy stuff. I am a consultant in a way. I consult with architects and contractors and interior designers and marketing firms and catering companies and event planners. I work from home because I own multiple homes, and my home office coordinates business across multiple states. And yes, I do strategy stuff, business strategy for a multi-million-dollar hospitality empire. David stared at her like she'd grown a second head. Multi-million-dollar? The resort where your family is having their precious wedding? I built it from the ground up. Designed every room, hired every employee, chose every piece of art. It's my vision, my sweat, my achievement. But how? When? I would have known. Would you? Simone leaned forward. David, in 8 years of marriage, how many times have you asked me about my work? Really asked, with genuine interest and attention? David opened and closed his mouth several times. I trusted you to tell me what you wanted me to know. Or you didn't think it was important enough to ask about. Just like you didn't think it was important enough to defend when your family made their little comments about my lifestyle and my urban career choices. This is insane. David stood up, running his hands through his hair. You're telling me that you're some kind of secret millionaire and you never thought to mention it? I'm telling you that I'm a successful businesswoman who built something incredible, and my own husband never cared enough to find out what I actually did for a living. Why didn't you tell me? The question hung between them, loaded with 8 years of assumptions and misunderstandings. At first, because I wanted to know that you loved me for me, not for what I could provide. Later, because I realized you were more comfortable thinking of me as someone small, someone manageable, someone who wouldn't overshadow you. David flinched. That's not true. Isn't it? Think about how you introduce me at your company parties. This is my wife, Simone. She does some consulting work. Think about how you talk about our finances. You always act like your salary is supporting our lifestyle, even though I contribute equally to everything. I never meant to make you feel small, invisible, like my work didn't matter. Simone shook her head. I know you didn't mean to, David. That's what makes it so much worse. It was unconscious, automatic. You couldn't even see what you were doing. David slumped back onto the couch. The resort where Robert's getting married is mine. Every dollar your family spent on that wedding went into my pocket. Every service they're receiving is provided by my employees. Every beautiful detail they're going to enjoy was created by the woman they decided wasn't good enough to attend. Oh God. David put his head in his hands. What are we going to do? We aren't going to do anything, David. I am going to attend my brother-in-law's wedding at my resort, as the owner and as your wife. You are going to decide whether you're going to stand with me or continue to enable your family's racism. It's not racism. Stop. Simone's voice cut through his protest like a blade. Don't you dare sit there and tell me it's not racism. Don't insult my intelligence or my lived experience. Your family has treated me like a second-class citizen for 8 years because I'm black. Period. Full stop. David looked up at her, and for the first time, she saw something that might have been understanding in his eyes. What do you want me to do? I want you to choose, David. For once in our marriage, I want you to choose. Your family or your wife. Your comfort or what's right. Your mother's approval or your integrity. That's not fair. Nothing about this has been fair. Fair would have been your family accepting me from day one. Fair would have been you standing up for me when they didn't. Fair would have been 8 years of feeling like I belonged in my own marriage. Simone stood up, suddenly exhausted by the weight of all the words that had been left unsaid for so long. I'm going to pack for the weekend. I'll be staying at the resort tonight, getting ready for tomorrow's festivities. You can drive up separately if you're coming, or you can stay here and avoid the whole thing. But either way, David, this conversation is over. Simone, wait. She paused at the foot of the stairs. There's something else you should know. I've invited my mother as my guest. She's very excited to finally meet your family properly. For the first time in hours, Simone smiled. This is going to be quite a weekend. Saturday morning dawned crisp and clear, the kind of perfect October day that made the Georgia mountains look like they'd been painted by God himself. Simone stood on the balcony of her penthouse suite, sipping coffee from bone china as she watched the controlled chaos of wedding preparation unfold on the grounds below. Grace Harper had arrived the night before, and Simone had never been happier to see her mother's serene, knowing smile. This place is magnificent, baby, Grace had said as James personally escorted them through the resort's amenities. You built all this? Every bit of it, Mama? And David's family has no idea? They're about to get educated. Now, as Simone watched florists arranging white roses and baby's breath in the garden gazebo, she felt a curious sense of calm. The storm was coming, but she was ready for it. Her phone buzzed with a text from Melanie, on my way up with the Spellman sisters. This is going to be legendary. The Spellman reunion had taken on a life of its own. What had started as Simone's strategic move had blossomed into something beautiful. Dr. Ruth Washington, the reunion organizer and Simone's former professor, had been thrilled to accept the resort's hospitality. Word had spread through networks of accomplished black women, and the guest list had grown from the original 50 alumni to nearly 200 women representing decades of excellence. There would be federal judges and Fortune 500 CEOs, Pulitzer Prize winners and Nobel laureates, women who had integrated universities and started companies and saved lives and changed laws. They would be celebrating their achievements and their sisterhood in the very space where Patricia Harper had worried about appropriate staff and high-class standards. James knocked on her suite door at precisely 9 a.m. Ms. Harper, the Harper family has arrived for their pre-ceremony brunch. All of them? David, Robert, Patricia, and the bride's family. David looks tense. Simone could imagine. He'd texted her twice the night before. Once to say he was coming to the wedding, and once to ask if they could talk privately before the ceremony. She hadn't responded to either message. And our reunion guests? Arriving in waves. Dr. Washington is already holding court in the library, and I've had 3 different women ask if they could meet the owner of this magnificent establishment. Simone smiled. Tell them they'll have their chance. What time is the bride scheduled for her prep? Noon in the Magnolia Suite. Hair and makeup, then photos. Perfect. I think I'll pay her a visit around 1 p.m. As the owner, checking on customer satisfaction. James grinned. I'll make sure the photographer captures everything. At 11:30, Simone made her way down to the resort's main level, dressed in a stunning royal blue dress that highlighted her complexion and her curves. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, elegant enough for a wedding, powerful enough for a confrontation. The main lobby was already bustling with activity. Spelman alumni were greeting each other with the kind of joy that came from women who had supported each other through decades of breaking barriers. Their laughter rang through the space like music, rich and warm and unapologetically black. And in the middle of it all, looking like deer caught in headlights, stood Patricia Harper and Jennifer's mother, both clutching mimosas and staring around them with barely concealed horror. Simone. Dr. Washington's voice carried across the lobby. Girls, come meet the phenomenal woman who made all this possible. Suddenly, Simone was surrounded by a group of women whose accomplishments read like a who's who of American excellence. Dr. Patricia Johnson, the first black woman to perform heart surgery in Georgia. Judge Althea Williams, who had presided over landmark civil rights cases. CEO Margaret Davis, whose tech company had just gone public for $2.3 billion. You built all this? Dr. Johnson asked, looking around at the soaring architecture and thoughtful design. From the ground up. My grandmother always said that if you want something done right, you do it yourself. Your grandmother was a wise woman, Judge Williams said. This place is extraordinary. The attention to detail, the way you've honored African American artists and craftspeople. It's a celebration of our culture. That was always the goal. To create a space where excellence and beauty and heritage could coexist. Patricia Harper was close enough to overhear the conversation, and Simone watched her face grow paler with each compliment, each revelation of the caliber of women surrounding her. Excuse me, Patricia interrupted, her voice strained. Are you all here for some kind of conference? The women turned to look at her, and Simone saw decades of experience dealing with microaggressions and condescension in their collective gaze. We're here for a reunion, Dr. Washington said coolly. Spelman College, class of 1965. Though we've been joined by sisters from other years as well. Spelman, Patricia repeated faintly. The premier historically black college for women, Judge Williams explained with the patience of someone who had spent her career educating the willfully ignorant. We're celebrating 58 years of excellence and sisterhood. Oh. Patricia looked around at the group of women, distinguished, accomplished, radiating the kind of confidence that came from a lifetime of achievement. That's nice. Isn't it wonderful? Simone said brightly. When Dr. Washington reached out about hosting their reunion, I couldn't say yes fast enough. It's an honor to welcome such remarkable women to Harper Grand Resort. Patricia's eyes met Simone's, and in that moment, the reality of the situation hit her full force. This wasn't just about a wedding anymore. This was about power, respect, and consequences. I should go check on Jennifer, Patricia mumbled, backing away from the group. Please give her my regards, Simone called after her. I'll be stopping by later to ensure everything is perfect for her special day. As Patricia hurried away, Dr. Washington turned to Simone with raised eyebrows. I'm sensing there's more to this story than a simple reunion and wedding coincidence. Isn't there always? Simone smiled. Ladies, shall we adjourn to the Mountain View Terrace for brunch? I believe Chef Williams has prepared something special. As the group moved toward the restaurant, Simone caught sight of David standing near the concierge desk. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, part admiration, part fear, part something that might have been pride. Their eyes met across the lobby, and for a moment, Simone saw a flash of the man she'd fallen in love with all those years ago. The man who had been impressed by her intelligence, her ambition, her refusal to be diminished by anyone or anything. But then Patricia appeared at his elbow, whispering urgently in his ear, and his expression closed off again. Simone turned away and followed her guests to brunch. The real show was about to begin. At exactly 1 p.m., Simone knocked on the door of the Magnolia Suite, where Jennifer was holding court like a blonde princess surrounded by her ladies-in-waiting. Through the partially open door, Simone could hear the chatter of bridesmaids, the whir of hair dryers, and Jennifer's voice directing everyone like a general commanding troops. Make sure my veil doesn't touch the ground. No, not like that. God, do I have to do everything myself? Simone straightened her shoulders and knocked again, louder this time. Come in. Jennifer called out impatiently. Simone stepped into a scene of wedding chaos. Jennifer sat in the center of the room in a white silk robe, her hair in elaborate curls, her makeup artist applying the finishing touches to her face. Bridesmaids in various states of undress were scattered around the suite, and the air smelled of hairspray and expensive perfume. The chatter stopped when Simone entered. Every eye in the room turned to her, taking in her royal blue dress, her confident bearing, her unmistakable presence. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Simone said smoothly. "I'm Simone Harper, the owner of Harper Grand Resort. I always like to check on our brides personally to ensure everything is meeting your expectations." The silence in the room was deafening. Jennifer's mouth fell open, her lipstick only half applied. You're the owner," one of the bridesmaids said slowly. "I am. And you must be Jennifer." Simone approached the bride with a warm smile. "I've been so looking forward to meeting you. I understand this is your special day." Jennifer found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "You're David's wife." "I am indeed. 8 wonderful years." Simone's smile never wavered. "I hope you don't mind that I'm attending the ceremony after all. Family is so important, don't you think?" But you weren't invited," one of the bridesmaids said tactlessly. Simone turned to her with raised eyebrows. "I wasn't invited to my brother-in-law's wedding? How strange. I can't imagine why that would be." The room erupted in whispered conversations as the bridesmaids began to piece together the situation. Jennifer looked like she was about to be sick. "Is everything all right, Jennifer? You look pale. I hope you're not coming down with something on your wedding day." "I'm fine," Jennifer managed. "Everything is fine." "Wonderful. I wanted to personally assure you that despite the mix-up earlier this week, everything is proceeding exactly as planned. Your guests are arriving, the flowers are spectacular, and our staff is ready to make this the perfect day you've dreamed of." Simone moved around the room, admiring the wedding dress hanging on the armoire, the bouquet of white roses, the array of makeup and jewelry spread across the vanity. "You know," she continued conversationally, "I've hosted over 300 weddings at this resort. Celebrity weddings, political figures, Fortune 500 executives. But every bride is special and every wedding is unique." She paused in front of the window that looked out over the gardens, where guests were beginning to gather for the ceremony. "I see some of your guests have arrived early. And some of mine too. The Spellman reunion is in full swing. Such accomplished women. You'll have to meet some of them at the reception. Dr. Patricia Johnson just performed a groundbreaking cardiac surgery last month. Judge Althea Williams was featured on the cover of Time magazine. CEO Margaret Davis is revolutionizing the tech industry." Jennifer's reflection in the mirror looked green around the gills. "I'm sure they're all very accomplished," she said weakly. "Oh, they are. Pioneers, really. Women who broke barriers and opened doors for people like me to build businesses like this one." Simone turned back to face the room. "Speaking of which, I should mention that my mother will be attending as my guest. She's so excited to finally meet David's family properly." "Your mother?" Jennifer's voice cracked. "Grace Harper. Retired educator, community activist, and the woman who taught me that excellence is the best response to ignorance." Simone checked her watch. "She should be arriving any moment, actually." As if summoned, there was a knock on the door. James entered with his usual professional discretion. "Miss Harper, your mother has arrived and is asking for you in the lobby." Perfect timing. Simone turned back to Jennifer and her bridesmaids. "Ladies, I'll leave you to finish your preparations. Jennifer, I know this is going to be a day you'll never forget." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Jennifer? You might want to touch up your makeup. You look a little overwhelmed." As Simone left the suite, she could hear the explosion of whispered conversations behind her. The bridesmaids were undoubtedly trying to process what had just happened, and Jennifer was probably wishing she could disappear into the floor. But the real fireworks were yet to come. Simone found her mother in the lobby, and the sight of Grace Harper in her elegant navy dress and pearls filled her with warmth and strength. At 58, Grace carried herself with the dignity of a woman who had faced down segregation, discrimination, and countless challenges with grace and determination. "There's my baby," Grace said, pulling Simone into a hug. "How are you holding up?" "I'm good, Mama. Really good." "And David?" "David is about to learn some very important lessons about family, respect, and consequences." Grace's smile was sharp with pride. "That's my girl. Now, where is this family that thinks they're too good for us? They're around somewhere. Probably trying to figure out how to handle the fact that all their assumptions just got turned upside down." As if on cue, David appeared at the far end of the lobby. He spotted Simone and Grace immediately, and Simone watched him gather his courage before walking over to them. "Mrs. Harper," he said formally, extending his hand to Grace. It's good to see you again. Grace looked at the offered hand for a long moment before shaking it. David, I wish I could say the same. The coldness in her voice could have frozen water. David flinched but pressed on. I'm glad you could make it to Robert's wedding. Are you? Grace's eyebrows rose. Because from what I understand, my daughter wasn't welcome at this family celebration until very recently. David's face flushed red. There was a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, baby, Grace said smoothly. Just truth coming to light. Truth about who your family really is and truth about who my daughter really is. She looked around the beautiful lobby, taking in the African art, the elegant furnishings, the obvious success and sophistication of the operation. You know, David, I raised my daughter to be strong, to be excellent, to never let anyone make her feel small. But I also raised her to love with her whole heart. Grace's voice softened slightly. She loved you enough to hide her light under a bushel for 8 years, thinking that would make you and your family more comfortable. Mrs. Harper. But here's the thing about light, David. It can't stay hidden forever. And when it finally shines, it shows everyone exactly what they've been missing. Simone watched her husband's face as her mother's words hit home. For the first time she thought she saw real understanding in his eyes. The ceremony starts in an hour, Simone said quietly. You should probably go find your family and prepare them for what's about to happen. David nodded, started to walk away, then turned back. Simone? I'm proud of you. I should have said that years ago, but I'm saying it now. I'm proud of what you've built and I'm ashamed of how I've acted. Thank you, Simone said simply. But David? Pride isn't enough anymore. I need to see action. He nodded again and walked away, leaving Simone and Grace standing together in the lobby of the empire Simone had built. You ready for this, baby? Grace asked. Simone looked around at her resort, at the Spellman sisters celebrating their achievements, at the wedding guests beginning to gather for a ceremony that was about to become much more than anyone had anticipated. I've been ready for this my whole life, Mama. The wedding ceremony was set to begin at 4 p.m. in Harper Grand Resort's signature garden space, a terraced amphitheater carved into the natural slope of the mountain with the Blue Ridge peaks providing a breathtaking backdrop. White chairs were arranged in perfect rows, adorned with flowing white ribbons and bouquets of roses. An elegant white arch stood at the altar, framed by ancient oak trees whose leaves had turned brilliant shades of gold and crimson. It was, by any measure, a perfect setting for a wedding. But as guests began to take their seats, the atmosphere crackled with tension that had nothing to do with pre-ceremony nerves. Simone stood at the back of the garden with her mother, watching the complex social dynamics unfold. On one side of the aisle sat the Harper family and Jennifer's relatives. Mostly white, mostly uncomfortable, stealing glances at the other side where the Spellman reunion attendees had claimed seats with the confidence of women who belonged everywhere they chose to be. Dr. Ruth Washington had embraced the opportunity to witness what she called a teaching moment in real time. Judge Althea Williams sat regally in the third row, her presence alone commanding respect. CEO Margaret Davis was comparing notes with Dr. Patricia Johnson about the resort's impeccable design and service. And scattered throughout were other wedding guests who seemed caught between two worlds, unsure where their loyalties should lie. David stood at the front with Robert and the groomsmen, his face pale but determined. Patricia Harper sat in the front row, clutching her purse like a shield, her mouth set in a thin line of barely controlled panic. Your husband looks like he's about to face a firing squad, Grace observed. He might be, Simone replied. That depends on what he does in the next hour. James appeared at Simone's elbow with his customary discretion. Ms. Harper, the bride is ready to begin her processional. Shall I cue the musicians? By all means. Let's give Jennifer the wedding she's always dreamed of. The string quartet began the opening notes of Pachelbel's canon, and the bridesmaids began their march down the aisle in flowing lavender dresses. They moved with practiced precision, but Simone could see the tension in their shoulders, the way their eyes darted nervously between the two very different groups of wedding guests. The ceremony proceeded with traditional vows and readings. Robert and Jennifer exchanged rings and promises of love that, in any other circumstances, would have been purely joyful. But Simone could see the weight of unspoken tensions in every gesture, every glance between the families. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife and invited Robert to kiss his bride, the applause was polite but restrained. This should have been a moment of pure celebration, but instead it felt like the calm before a storm. Ladies and gentlemen, the minister announced, I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Robert Harper. As the newlyweds walked back down the aisle, beaming with joy, Simone felt a pang of sadness. This young couple was starting their marriage in the shadow of family prejudice and misunderstanding. They deserved better. But perhaps what was about to happen would give them a chance for better. The cocktail hour was held on the Mountain View Terrace, where guests mingled over champagne and hors d'oeuvres while the newlyweds took photos. It was here that the real tension began to surface. Simone watched from across the terrace as Patricia Harper cornered David near the bar. Even from a distance, she could see the heated whispered conversation, Patricia's animated gestures, David's increasingly defensive posture. Trouble in paradise? Grace murmured. Just the reckoning that's been 8 years in the making. Dr. Washington approached them, champagne flute in hand. Simone, this resort is absolutely magnificent. The way you've integrated local artists and craftspeople, the attention to sustainable practices, the celebration of cultural heritage. It's a masterclass in hospitality with purpose. Thank you, Dr. Washington. That means everything coming from you. I hope you don't mind me asking, but there seems to be some tension at this wedding, beyond the usual family drama. Simone glanced at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. The groom is my brother-in-law. His family has spent 8 years making it clear that I'm not welcome in their circle. They uninvited me from this wedding because they felt I wouldn't fit with their traditional celebration. Dr. Washington's eyebrows rose. They uninvited you from your own resort? They had no idea it was mine. My husband has never shown enough interest in my work to know what I actually do for a living. Good Lord. Dr. Washington shook her head. And now they're discovering that the woman they considered beneath them owns the very place they chose for their most important family celebration. Poetic justice, Grace said with satisfaction. Indeed. Dr. Washington studied Simone with the keen eyes of someone who had navigated decades of similar challenges. What happens next? That depends on my husband. And his family. And whether they're ready to face some uncomfortable truths about respect, dignity, and what family really means. As if summoned by their conversation, David appeared at Simone's side. His face was flushed, his jaw tight with barely controlled emotion. We need to talk, he said quietly. Now. Simone looked at her mother and Dr. Washington. Excuse me, ladies. Duty calls. She followed David to a quiet corner of the terrace, away from the other guests but still visible to anyone who cared to watch. My family is freaking out, David said without preamble. Are they? My mother wants to know why you never told me about your business. Robert wants to know if this is some kind of elaborate revenge plot. Jennifer's parents are talking about whether they can cancel the reception and go somewhere else. And what did you tell them? David ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she'd seen 1,000 times over 8 years of marriage. But this time there was something different in his posture. Something that looked like backbone. I told them that you're my wife, that you're brilliant and successful and everything I should have been celebrating for years instead of taking for granted. I told them that if anyone should be embarrassed tonight, it's me, for not knowing my own wife well enough to understand what she's accomplished. Simone studied his face. And I told them that if they can't treat you with the respect you deserve, they can find another venue for their reception. For the first time in days, Simone felt genuinely surprised. You said that? I said that. To my mother, to Robert, to anyone who would listen. David stepped closer, his voice dropping. Simone, I've been a coward. I've let my family treat you terribly because it was easier than standing up to them. I've diminished your achievements because they made me feel small. I've been a terrible husband. Yes, Simone said simply. You have. I know. And I know that saying I'm sorry isn't enough. I know that promising to do better isn't enough. But I'm saying it anyway because it's true, and because I love you more than I love my family's approval. Before Simone could respond, James appeared at her elbow with an expression of barely contained urgency. Ms. Harper, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation that requires your immediate attention. What kind of situation? The bride's family is demanding to speak with you about canceling the reception. They're quite agitated. Simone looked at David, then at the wedding guests mingling on the terrace, then at the beautiful celebration she'd worked so hard to create. Tell them I'll be right there, she said calmly. It's time to finish this. The Magnolia conference room had been transformed into a makeshift war room. Jennifer's parents, Patricia Harper, and 2 of Robert's groomsmen had claimed the space like occupying forces, their voices raised in animated argument about options and alternatives. Simone entered the room with the calm confidence of someone walking into her own domain. She was followed by David, Grace, and Dr. Washington, who had insisted on providing what she called moral support and witness testimony. Ladies and gentlemen, Simone said, her voice cutting through the chatter like a blade. I understand you wanted to speak with me. Jennifer's mother, a thin woman with perfectly styled silver hair and the pinched expression of someone perpetually dissatisfied, stepped forward like a general addressing the troops. Mrs. Harper, we need to discuss the situation that's developed regarding tonight's reception. What situation would that be? The presence of additional guests who weren't part of our original arrangements. Simone's smile was arctic. You mean the Spelman College reunion attendees? Accomplished women celebrating their achievements at a resort I built specifically to honor excellence and heritage. We booked this venue for a private wedding celebration, Patricia Harper interjected, her voice shrill with barely controlled panic. We didn't agree to share the space with outsiders. Outsiders. Simone repeated the word slowly, tasting its implications. How exactly do you define outsiders, Patricia? People who aren't part of the wedding party. People who don't belong. People who don't look like you, Grace Harper interrupted, stepping forward with the presence of a woman who had faced down much worse than suburban racism. Why don't you just say what you mean, honey? The room fell silent. Jennifer's mother looked like she was choking on her own words. This is about race, Dr. Washington said calmly, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had presided over landmark civil rights cases. You're uncomfortable sharing space with accomplished black women at an event hosted by a black woman at a resort owned by a black woman. Is that correct? That's not what this is about, Jennifer's father blustered, but his face was red and his hands were shaking. Then explain it to me, Simone said. Because from where I'm standing it looks like you booked a venue at a resort that celebrates African American culture and heritage, demanded that the staff remove any evidence of that culture for your event, made disparaging comments about the appropriateness of my employees, and are now upset to discover that successful black women will be present during your celebration. We paid for exclusivity, Jennifer's mother said desperately. You paid for the grand ballroom and gardens, which you'll have exclusive use of for your reception. The rest of the resort is available for other guests as clearly stated in your contract. Simone pulled out a folder containing all the correspondence and contracts. Would you like me to review the specific terms you agreed to? This is ridiculous, one of the groomsmen said. There has to be something you can do. Move the other event, refund our money, something. Move the other event. Simone turned to face him directly. You want me to ask a group of accomplished women, doctors, lawyers, judges, business leaders, to move their reunion so that you can be more comfortable? Is that what you're suggesting? That's exactly what we're suggesting, Patricia Harper said, her mask of politeness finally slipping completely. This is my son's wedding day. It's supposed to be perfect, and having those people here is ruining everything. The silence that followed was deafening. Those people, Grace Harper repeated softly. My God, you really just said that out loud. David, who had been standing quietly in the corner, suddenly stepped forward. Mother, stop talking. Right now. David, don't you dare take her side. Her side. David's voice cracked with emotion. Mother, she's my wife. Her side is supposed to be my side. It should have been my side 8 years ago, and it's damn sure going to be my side now. Patricia Harper stared at her son like he'd grown horns. You can't possibly choose this woman over your own family. This woman? David's voice rose. This woman is my family. She's my wife, she built this incredible business empire, she's accomplished more than any of us ever dreamed of, and you want to call her, this woman? He turned to face the room, his face flushed with years of suppressed anger and newfound courage. My wife owns this resort. She employed every person serving you tonight. She designed every detail you've been enjoying. She created this beautiful space where your son is getting married, and you have the unmitigated gall to ask her to make other guests leave so you can be more comfortable. David, Jennifer's mother tried to interrupt. No. I'm talking now. David's voice was stronger than Simone had ever heard it. For 8 years I've watched my family treat my wife like she wasn't good enough. Like she was some kind of charity case I'd picked up out of misguided sympathy. I've listened to your comments about her background, her culture, her achievements. I've watched you exclude her from family events and make her feel unwelcome in her own marriage. He paused, looking directly at his mother. And I've been a coward. I've let it happen because it was easier than standing up to you. Because I was more concerned with keeping peace than protecting the woman I promised to love and honor. Patricia Harper's face went white. How dare you speak to me like that? How dare I? Mother, how dare you treat my wife the way you have? How dare you try to erase her from family celebrations? How dare you assume she wasn't worthy of basic respect and dignity? Simone watched her husband with a mixture of pride and sorrow. This was the man she'd fallen in love with, strong, principled, willing to stand up for what was right. But it had taken 8 years and a public confrontation for him to find his voice. "The reception will proceed as planned," Simone said calmly. "You're welcome to enjoy the celebration you paid for, in the company of whichever guests choose to attend. Or you're welcome to leave. But you will not ask me to discriminate against other guests to make you more comfortable." Jennifer's mother looked like she was about to explode. "This is outrageous. We'll sue. We'll demand a full refund. We'll make sure no one ever books events here again." "Feel free to try," Simone replied evenly. "My legal team includes 3 former federal prosecutors and the best entertainment law firm in Atlanta. My customer base includes Fortune 500 executives, federal judges, and governors from 6 states. But by all means, explain to them why you think your daughter's wedding reception is more important than basic human dignity." Dr. Washington stepped forward, her presence commanding immediate attention. "I think we've heard enough. The choice is simple. You can celebrate this young couple's marriage in the spirit of love and family, which includes accepting all family members with respect, or you can continue to embarrass yourselves with behavior that belongs in the 1950s. She looked around the room with the stern gaze of someone who had spent decades fighting for justice. "But let me be very clear, we are not leaving. We have every right to be here, we're conducting ourselves with dignity and grace, and we're celebrating achievements that this nation should be proud of." "So what's it going to be?" Grace Harper asked, her voice carrying the quiet strength of someone who had faced down much worse than this. "Are you going to choose love, or are you going to choose hate?" The room fell silent again. Jennifer's parents looked at each other, at Patricia Harper, at the faces around them. For a moment, Simone thought they might actually choose wisely. Then Jennifer's mother straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin with the entitlement of someone who had never been told no. "We're leaving," she announced. "We'll take our business elsewhere." "The reception is in 2 hours, James pointed out diplomatically. "Your guests are already gathered, your vendors are in place, and your daughter is expecting to celebrate her wedding tonight." "Then she can celebrate without us," Jennifer's father said coldly. "We won't be part of this circus." With that, they swept out of the room, leaving behind a silence that felt both heavy and oddly relieved. Patricia Harper stood frozen for a moment, torn between following Jennifer's parents and staying for her son's wedding. Finally, she looked at David with eyes full of hurt and confusion. "I hope you're happy," she said quietly. "I hope she was worth destroying your family." "She didn't destroy our family, Mother," David said sadly. "You did. With 8 years of racism and cruelty disguised as tradition." Patricia Harper walked out without another word. David turned to Simone, his face pale but determined. "I guess that's that." "I guess it is," Simone agreed. "How do you feel?" "Terrified. Relieved. Ashamed that it took this long." He looked at her with eyes that held 8 years of regret. "Can you ever forgive me?" Before Simone could answer, there was a soft knock on the door. Robert appeared in the doorway, still in his wedding tuxedo, his face etched with pain and confusion. "Is it true that Jennifer's family left?" he asked quietly. "Yes," David said. "And so did Mom." Robert slumped against the doorframe. "What am I supposed to tell Jennifer? How do I explain that our families just abandoned us on our wedding day?" It was Grace Harper who answered, her voice gentle with the wisdom of someone who had weathered many storms. "Baby, you tell your wife that marriage isn't about the families you came from. It's about the family you choose to build together. And if those families can't support your love with respect and dignity for all involved, then maybe it's time to build something better." Robert looked at Simone with eyes that reminded her painfully of David's. "I'm sorry. For all of this. I never wanted. I didn't know." "I know you didn't," Simone said gently. "The question is, what do you want to do now?" The grand ballroom of Harper Grand Resort had been transformed into a wonderland of white roses, soft lighting, and elegant drapery that seemed to float like clouds from the soaring ceiling. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over round tables dressed in ivory linens, and the wall of windows overlooking the mountains had been opened to let in the crisp evening air. It should have been the perfect setting for a fairy tale reception. Instead, it felt like the aftermath of a battlefield. Simone stood in the doorway surveying the scene. Half the tables were empty. Jennifer's family and several of their friends had followed her parents out of the resort in a dramatic exodus that would probably fuel gossip for years. Patricia Harper's absence left a gaping hole at the family table. The remaining guests sat in uncomfortable clusters, unsure whether they should stay or go, celebrate or mourn the family fracture they just witnessed. And in the center of it all sat Jennifer and Robert, the newlyweds who should have been glowing with happiness but instead looked shell-shocked and lost. "This is heartbreaking," Grace murmured beside her daughter. "Those poor children." Simone watched as Jennifer dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, trying not to ruin her makeup while her new husband held her hand and whispered what appeared to be reassurances. Around them, the remaining wedding guests made awkward small talk and avoided looking directly at the couple's obvious distress. "What do you want to do, baby?" Grace asked. "This is your event now." Simone considered her options. She could let the reception proceed as planned, awkward, truncated, overshadowed by family drama. She could quietly withdraw and let the young couple figure out how to salvage their celebration. Or she could do what her grandmother had always taught her: lead with grace and show others what was possible. "James," she called to her resort manager, who was hovering nearby with the concerned expression of someone watching a perfect event dissolve into chaos. "Yes, ma'am?" "Are the Spellman sisters still planning to hold their celebration dinner in the Dogwood Room?" "Yes, ma'am." Dr. Washington said they didn't want to interfere with the wedding reception. "Change of plans." "Ask Dr. Washington if she'd be willing to combine the celebrations. Tell her I think it's time for some healing, and I could use the wisdom of extraordinary women." James's face broke into a slow smile. "Yes, ma'am. I think she'll love that idea." Simone walked across the ballroom toward the head table, her heels clicking on the polished marble floor. Conversations quieted as she passed, and she could feel the weight of curious and apprehensive stares. When she reached Jennifer and Robert, she pulled out the empty chair that should have held Patricia Harper and sat down. "How are you two holding up?" she asked gently. Jennifer looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "I don't understand what just happened. One minute I was getting married and the next minute both our families are gone. My parents said, they said things about you, about your guests that I don't even want to repeat." "I'm sorry you had to hear that," Simone said sincerely. "No bride should have to deal with family drama on her wedding day." "But why?" Robert asked, his voice cracking with emotion. "Why did it have to come to this? Why couldn't everyone just get along for one day?" Simone looked at this young man who shared David's features but seemed to have a softer heart, and felt a pang of sympathy. He genuinely didn't understand how they'd gotten here. "Robert, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "In the 2 years you've been with Jennifer, how many times have you heard your mother or her parents make comments about my background, my culture, or my relationship with David?" Robert's face flushed. There were some comments, but I thought they were just, old-fashioned thinking. I didn't think they meant anything serious." "And when those comments were made, what did you do?" The young man looked down at his hands. "I didn't do anything. I figured it wasn't my place to get involved in family politics." "Family politics." Simone repeated the phrase thoughtfully. "Robert, when someone makes racist comments about your brother's wife, that's not politics. That's hate. And when you stay silent, you're choosing a side." "I never thought of it that way," Jennifer said quietly. "When my mother said those things, I just thought she was being protective. But now, hearing them said out loud in front of everyone," she shuddered. "I'm ashamed." "Good," Simone said, and both young people looked surprised. Being ashamed means you recognize that something was wrong. That's the first step toward making it right. David appeared at Simone's shoulder, his face still pale from the confrontation but his posture straighter than she'd seen it in years. "Robert, Jennifer, I owe you both an apology," he said. "This situation happened because I've been a coward for 8 years. I should have shut down the racism in our family from day one. I should have protected my wife, and I should have protected you two from being raised to think that kind of behavior was acceptable." "David," Robert started, but his older brother held up a hand. "No, let me finish. What happened tonight, our mother leaving, Jennifer's parents walking out, that's on me. I created this situation by letting things go on for too long, by choosing the easy path instead of the right path." He looked at Simone with eyes full of regret and love. "But I'm done being a coward. Simone is my wife, my partner, my best friend, and the most accomplished person I know. Anyone who can't treat her with respect doesn't belong in our lives." Before anyone could respond, Dr. Washington approached the table with the regal bearing of someone accustomed to being heard. "Excuse me, young folks. I hope I'm not interrupting, but I wanted to extend an invitation on behalf of the Spellman sisters." She looked at Jennifer and Robert with the warm eyes of someone who had spent decades mentoring young people through difficult transitions. "We're about to sit down to our celebration dinner in the Dogwood Room, and we'd be honored if you'd join us. All of you," she added, looking around at the remaining wedding guests. "We've been celebrating sisterhood and achievement tonight, but family is family, and new beginnings deserve to be honored. Jennifer looked confused. But we don't even know you. Why would you want us at your celebration? Dr. Washington smiled. Honey, I've been fighting for justice and equality for 60 years. I've learned that the best way to combat hate is with love, and the best way to heal division is with inclusion. She gestured toward the doorway where other Spelman alumni were gathering. These women have broken barriers, opened doors, and built bridges their entire careers. We know something about turning painful moments into powerful ones. Besides, Judge Williams added, approaching the group, your new sister-in-law is one of the most impressive young entrepreneurs I've met in years. Any family that's smart enough to include her is a family we'd like to know better. Simone felt tears prick her eyes. These women, who had every reason to retreat into their own celebration and avoid the messiness of other people's family drama, were instead extending grace and inclusion. What do you say? Simone asked Jennifer and Robert. Ready to start your marriage with a celebration of what's possible when people choose love over fear? Jennifer looked at her new husband, then at David, then at the group of distinguished women who were offering to transform their wedding disaster into something beautiful. Yes, she said, her voice growing stronger. Yes, I think I'd like that very much. As the remaining wedding guests began moving toward the Dogwood Room, where the resort staff was quickly reconfiguring the space to accommodate the expanded celebration, Simone felt David take her hand. Can you forgive me? He asked quietly. Can we start over? Simone looked at her husband, really looked at him, for the first time in years. She saw the boy she'd fallen in love with in college, the man who had supported her dreams even when he didn't fully understand them, the partner who had just publicly chosen their marriage over his family's approval. We can't start over, David, she said gently. But we can start fresh. We can build something better, something based on truth and respect and real partnership. I'd like that, he said. I'd like that very much. As they walked toward the celebration that was about to begin, a wedding reception transformed into a gathering of joy, achievement, and hope. Simone felt lighter than she had in years. The last thing she heard before entering the Dogwood Room was Jennifer's voice, clear and determined as she spoke to one of her remaining bridesmaids. I need you to call everyone who left tonight. Tell them they made a mistake, and that Robert and I are starting our marriage surrounded by people who know how to love without conditions. The soft chime of Simone's office doorbell interrupted her review of the quarterly financial reports that showed Harper Luxury Resorts' best 6-month performance in company history. She looked up from her desk in the penthouse suite of Harper Grand Resort. The same suite where she'd planned the confrontation that changed everything. Come in, she called. To her surprise, Jennifer entered, carrying a small gift bag and wearing the kind of nervous smile that suggested both hope and uncertainty. I hope I'm not interrupting, Jennifer said. James told me you were here for the weekend and I was hoping we could talk. Of course. Please sit down. Simone gestured to the comfortable seating area by the windows that looked out over the mountains. How are you and Robert settling into married life? It's been an adjustment, Jennifer said honestly, settling into the chair across from Simone. We've had a lot of difficult conversations about family, about privilege, about things I never really had to think about before. She paused, looking down at her hands. I wanted to apologize. Not just for what happened at the wedding but for everything that led up to it. The emails I sent about your staff, the request to change the music and the art, I was completely out of line. I appreciate that, Simone said. But you weren't the only one making those decisions. No, but I was an adult who chose to go along with them instead of questioning them. My parents raised me to think that our way of doing things was the right way, the only way, and I never challenged that until I was forced to. Jennifer reached into her gift bag and pulled out a beautifully wrapped package. This is for you. It's not much, but I wanted you to have something meaningful. Simone unwrapped the gift carefully, revealing a framed photograph from the wedding reception. But it wasn't a traditional wedding photo. Instead, it showed the moment when Dr. Washington was teaching Jennifer and Robert how to step dance, surrounded by laughing Spelman sisters and the remaining wedding guests. Everyone in the photo was beaming, their faces glowing with the kind of joy that came from unexpected connections and shared humanity. It was the best part of my wedding, Jennifer said softly. That moment when I realized that all the things my parents had taught me to fear were actually things I'd been missing out on. The music, the laughter, the sense of community, it was beautiful. Simone studied the photograph, remembering that magical hour when barriers had dissolved and people had simply enjoyed each other's company. Dr. Washington had indeed turned a potential disaster into something transformative. How are things with your parents? Simone asked. Complicated. They're still angry about what happened, still convinced that you somehow orchestrated the whole thing to embarrass them. Jennifer sighed. But Robert and I have made it clear that they need to figure out how to treat you and David with respect if they want to be part of our lives. And David's mother? She's come around slowly. I think losing Robert's wedding was a wake-up call for her. She started making an effort, asking questions about your business, trying to understand what she missed all these years. Simone felt a flutter of surprise. Patricia Harper had indeed reached out several times over the past few months, awkward but genuine attempts to bridge the gap that her own actions had created. David tells me she's been taking cooking classes, Jennifer continued with a small smile. Southern cuisine specifically. She wants to learn how to make your grandmother's cornbread recipe. This was news to Simone, and she felt an unexpected warmth at the gesture. Patricia Harper learning to cook soul food was about as close to an apology as she was likely to get. How is the marriage counseling going? Simone asked. She knew that Jennifer and Robert had started therapy immediately after the wedding, determined not to repeat their family's mistakes. Eye-opening. Dr. Martinez has helped us understand how much of what we thought was normal was actually harmful. We're learning to build a relationship based on equality and respect rather than assumptions and tradition. Jennifer leaned forward, her expression earnest. Simone, I need you to know that what happened at our wedding changed everything for us. Not just the family drama but seeing what you built, meeting those incredible women, understanding that there was a whole world of excellence and achievement that we'd been blind to. I'm glad something positive came out of it. More than positive. Transformative. Jennifer's voice grew stronger. I've enrolled in graduate school to study social work. I want to work with organizations that promote racial equity and economic justice. And Robert has joined the board of the scholarship fund that Dr. Washington told us about, the one that helps first-generation college students. Simone felt genuine pride in this young woman who had grown so much in just 6 months. That's wonderful, Jennifer. That's the kind of work that really makes a difference. It's work I never would have considered before I met you and your friends. Before I understood how much I had to learn. Jennifer paused. There's something else. Robert and I are planning to renew our vows on our first anniversary, and we'd like to do it here at the resort. But this time we want to do it right. What does right mean to you? It means celebrating all of our families, honoring all of our traditions, and making sure that love is the only requirement for attendance. Jennifer smiled. Dr. Washington has agreed to officiate, and your mother has promised to help us plan a reception that actually reflects the joy and diversity that marriage should represent. Simone felt tears threaten. You've come a long way in 6 months. We had good teachers. And we had a powerful example of what real strength and grace look like under pressure. As Jennifer prepared to leave, she turned back one more time. Simone, thank you for not giving up on us. You could have written us off as hopeless, but instead you gave us a chance to be better. That's a gift we'll never forget. After Jennifer left, Simone sat alone in her office, looking out at the mountains that had witnessed so much change over the past year. Her phone buzzed with a text from David, "Dinner with Mom tonight. She's making cornbread. Can you believe it?" She smiled and typed back, "Can't wait to taste it. Love you." The response came immediately, "Love you too. Thank you for never giving up on me." Simone set down her phone and picked up the framed photograph Jennifer had given her. In it, she could see the exact moment when fear had transformed into joy, when prejudice had given way to possibility, when a wedding disaster had become a celebration of what was possible when people chose love over hate. Her grandmother had always said that the best revenge was a life well lived. But looking at this photo, Simone realized that the best revenge was actually transformation. Turning moments of pain into opportunities for growth, using power not to punish but to heal, and building bridges strong enough to support the weight of difficult truths. Harper Grand Resort had hosted hundreds of events over the years, but Simone knew that Robert and Jennifer's wedding would always be the most important. Not because it was the most elegant or the most expensive, but because it was the day that fear gave way to love, and a family learned that real strength came not from exclusion but from inclusion. The mountains outside her window glowed in the late afternoon sun, solid and enduring, A reminder that some things were built to last. Like love. Like dignity. Like the bonds that formed when people chose to see each other's humanity instead of their differences. Simone Harper smiled and returned to her work, building the empire that her grandmother had dreamed of, one act of grace at a time.